Good evening and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. It's just gone from the 18th to the 19th of February 2015. We are on the break, the cusp, the dawn of a new moon, which happened only a few minutes ago, literally. And tonight we hope to be a special show and a special night. This is the Velocity of Now, and if you want to visit my website, it's www.thomassheridanarts.com. There's also uploads from my YouTube channel, which is Thomas Sheridan Arts on YouTube, to the media site for this program and other specials I produce at newsymbolsmedia.tv. If you want to help me out, you can go to my website, Thomas Sheridan Arts, click on the book shop link at the top, and purchase one of the books there. You're getting knowledge and you're helping me out too, and you're helping spread the message. If you can't afford a book, share the sites and spread the word. And you have been spreading the word, and I want to thank you for this. The numbers have been phenomenal for downloads and listens. I've been late getting the YouTube versions up, which happens. It's not my fault. It's not anyone's fault. The producers of the show are in the middle of a horrific house move at the moment, and they can't help it. So as soon as they're settled in and we're all settled in, that'll be a lot quicker. But right now, bear with us because real life stuff comes into it. So I want to thank Paula and Neil for that. I also want to thank Carrie Lee and Kira Young over at the Moon Lodge on peoplesinternetradio.com, who will have a special tonight because they always have a program on the new moon, and it's going to have featured Mater X. So that's on after this show. So you have a choice of either hanging on for this show to listen to George and Dee, or you can switch over to People's Internet Radio and listen to Kira Young and Carrie Lee, who've been very gracious in moving their show back 2 hours so we could capture as many people as possible on this beautiful celebration. Now, things are strange at the moment, and tonight's show I want to basically talk about, well, lots of things, but it'll be in the context to begin with of the so-called satanic paedophile abuse ring in Hampstead in London. Now, this story has absolutely exploded within the alternative media, and it's exposed basically everything that's wrong with the so-called truth movement, the conspiracy movement, the alternative movement, whatever you want to call it. Everything that's wrong with this scene has been exposed with this disaster. The background on the story, I'll give it to you if you're not aware of it. In the UK, in Hampstead, which is in, I think, North London, 2 children were put on a video, which you can see on the internet, which I would discourage people from sharing because those kids' identities are not being protected, claiming that the usual story, a massive satanic paedophile ring operating in Hampstead, and they're in the centre of it, and they're raped, and there's child murders, all the usual kind of, and I don't mean this in a twisted way. I mean it in capital letters, in a sexy way, in the way that politicians and intelligence services sex up dossiers in order to justify wars and other intelligence operations. This has been likewise sexed up using all the trigger words such as pedophilia and Satanism to fire up as many, shall we say, unstable and hysterical elements within this movement. And let's be honest, that is a vast amount. It's also firing up the Google AdSense hunter jockeys who want to put this stuff all over everywhere so they can rack up their Google points, build their audience, and get their donations button flying. And I don't play that game. I'm not here to do truth consensus. I'm not part of the team. And I don't care if I'm left with one person listening to me. I don't care. I didn't do this. I don't do this to be Mr. Popular. I come from the mindset of an old-fashioned investigative journalist. I look into things. I see what the story is, and then I relate it back to past events to try and see if there are emerging patterns. And what floats my boat more than anything else is when a story enters this movement or this scene and it spreads like absolute wildfire. This is a huge red flag for me, and this is a huge prompt, shall we say, for me to jump in there and start looking at it. Now, I want to begin tonight by reading out to you an article, and I'll comment over the article, a blog post that I've written today on my blog, which you get to from thomassheridanarts.com. You'll see a button at the top saying official blog, and this is the story, and this will bring it to this story. And I'll also put this in the link section of newsymbolsmedia.tv. MI5 back in the engineered hysteria game again. One of the reasons I believe that the Holly Greig story, that was a story in Scotland from about 7 or 8 years ago, it's been running now, of an alleged satanic paedophile ring again, and involving a Down syndrome lady. One of the reasons I believe the Holly Greig story is a hoax, apart from the fact there's zero evidence based almost entirely on an unsworn statement, is because it happened at a time when people in the alternative media were looking into the Dunblane genuine horror and asking questions the mainstream media were not asking. Now, what Dunblane was a horrific school massacre that happened in Scotland. And a person called Thomas Hamilton, who shows all the behavior and traits and of a mind control slave, basically. He shot 16 children, young school children, and a teacher dead. And it was used, basically it was immediately being used to justify gun control laws in the UK. At the time, Tony Blair was I think Tony Blair was the Prime Minister. It was going well until the British gun lobby contacted a journalist called Sandra Utley, I think her name was, and she wrote a book called Dunblane Unburied, and she asked some pertinent questions about Hamilton, his connections, and other individuals through basically an interesting connection of well-connected individuals going back to Hamilton and right to the Prime Minister's office. Tony Blair sealed the files for the usual 50 years or whatever it is. And the alternative media at the time was really getting results on this. They were really, really jumping in on this story, and it was getting into the mainstream. And then suddenly this thing called Holly Greig shows up out of the blue and spreads with the same psychotic wildfire that this current Hampstead abuse story is taking on. I'll continue in the article. I think, this is me quoting myself, I think the Hampstead story is being used to distract from something else which we were getting close to, and MI5 had to create some new bright lights of satanic sparklers and paedophile sprinkles in order to move highly excitable and hysterical types' attention away from something very real and dangerous to the establishment. Now, what makes me have this suspicion? More or less the same characters are involved in both these cases. A kind of network of interesting individuals, shall we say, who are behind the hyping up and the, shall we say, truther legitimization of the Holly Greig case are also heavily involved in this case. We also have the same wild hysteria and same reactions from the alternative media. They're going crazy, falling over themselves because they're hearing those trigger words, those magical, scintillating trigger words. Pedophiles, rings, and satanic. Again, we have a mother with questionable behaviour being held up as some kind of saint and martyr. Now, this woman, at the very least, should not have put her children visible on this video and put it out there, because they're on the world, they're being shared all over the place now in this kind of psychotic frenzy, and those kids will have to live with the horrific repercussions for them later on in terms of school bullying and so forth. And there's also another angle to this as well. If these kids were, let's say these kids were abused, well, the case has been destroyed. It's been completely destroyed, the case. It's been destroyed because they've named people who were involved, and I'll get to this later, that are allegedly involved, and the whole case has been trolled. There'll never be a prosecution here, just like there'll never be a prosecution in the Holly Greig case. It's a massive distraction to throw people off away from the scent of something else, and I'll explain to you what that is in it later on and why it is. Now, most depressing of all are the people who have been found guilty of no crimes or having their lives ruined after being outed as satanic pedophiles. And this is the most disgusting part and shows the, shall we say, the inherent psychotic depravity of so many people in the so-called truth movement, that they do not even have the decency to apply any kind of morality breaks. While calling themselves spiritual and empaths, they throw the names of people who've been convicted of nothing, arrested for nothing, all over the internet. Now, do you remember the evidence claiming that Holly Gregg was telling the truth, that people with Down syndrome do not lie? That's absolute rubbish. I've actually worked with people with Down syndrome, and they lie all the time. In fact, they make up constant stories. I was doing an art class in a place, it was kind of like a day centre for people with Down syndrome, and they used to come in and tell you the most ridiculous stories, and it's just the way they are. They'd say that they had a boyfriend and they were on the moon and all this kind of thing. What they are using as evidence in the Hampstead case, kids do not make up stories about sex abuse. Yes, they do. Anyone who thinks that kids are completely innocent don't remember their own childhood. As Bruno Bettelheim, in the book The Uses of Enchantment, he demonstrated that childhood is filled with all kinds of darkness, all kinds of negative traits and negative behaviours. And more importantly, if these kids were abused, you see, when you always get down, I'm not going to implicate anybody here in this because I don't know anything more than any of the rest of you, but usually in these cases, it's a partner or someone involved in the immediate circle who, if the kids have been abused, and remember, abuse isn't always sexual. It could be something like neglect, and it could be something like hitting them, striking the kids when they're bad, unnecessarily, and then to trump those, or should we say sex those stories up, it suddenly becomes sex abuse. And kids will also say anything for a reward if they're told to say. Now, let's get to the beef and all this. Now, I'm going to be spending some time explaining how intelligence services work. Now, let me explain to you how I feel about this case. All the evidence points that the mother is probably the most, shall we say, the most pathological element within all this. She exposed her 2 children to the frenzy of alternative media. It should have never been done. Secondly, if the kids were abused, and I'm not saying they are, and I was looking at the kids again video, they do look somehow kind of neglected. They do have that lack of, they almost look like they were raised in a Romanian orphanage. But no prosecution will ever be available to help these kids because the case has been completely destroyed by the hysteria around the satanic sex abuse, and particularly that word satanic. Thirdly, I do believe that there are satanic rings. I'm talking about dark black satanic rings, but I also, just like there are many cults, and the black satanic cults function and operate, you'd be surprised, mainly in affluent neighbourhoods and affluent places such as Hampstead. It comes basically out of the swingers scene. Rich or upper middle class families into swinging scenes get into kind of a black satanic aspect of that. It's all to do with further thrills. Now, as we know, it's cult orientated. Rich people are just as stupid when it comes to joining cults as anyone else. Cults are heavily involved and extremely useful to the intelligence services because they allow the intelligence services to leak and manipulate through the cult. So I'm basically agreeing that maybe the kids are possibly abused. There is a satanic aspect to it, but it's not what you guys out there think it is, because you don't know. You're completely ignorant of what Satanism is. There's a huge whiff of the intelligence services in this, and I'll explain to you why. And the mother, as it stands, similar to the Holly Gregg case, is a serious questionable judgment and, shall we say, behaviour. If I was to, I'm going to go back to reading to the article again, quoting myself again. If I was to make a guess as to why the intelligence services created this latest satanic abuse false flag, it would be to distract from the list of MPs and the sex parties which came to light in late 2004. And this is what's happening, okay? The story went mainstream and the establishment were clearly very, very worried. It meant major newspapers carried it. I saw it on mainstream message boards. The stories of an MP in Westminster who murdered a young boy during a sex party. The New Scotland Yard are investigating it. The story was major, it was breaking, and it was one that started in the alternative media. Just like Dunblane back in the day, we were getting results. We were actually starting to look like a competent group of people. And then suddenly what happens? They throw in another hysteria-infused distraction. So suddenly the alternative media has forgotten all about the case involving the MP sex parties, which are very, very real, and the possible murder of a young boy by an MP. And this appears to be a real scandal because the mainstream media is covering it. And they are now looking, this is the Truth Movement, wildly for non-existent satanic pedo rings in Hampstead. There's the same round of nasty infighting going on in the alternative movement, with the true believers calling anyone who doubts the Hampstead case as being pedos themselves. The same sickness and division like last time. The establishment got caught with the proverbial knickers down during the Profumo affair. That's when they found out that basically the same kind of sex parties and swinging scenes that's probably behind the satanic element in Hampstead were basically being trapped by the KGB. Since then, MI5 has been active in creating distractions so this never happens again. We had the satanic panic in Rochdale in the 1980s, and that was to deflect from Cyril Smith and possibly Jimmy Savile and their other boy-raping friends. In 2015, they have done it again with the Hampstead case. Mission accomplished. Now, I want to present evidence as to why I feel this way about this. I'm not just throwing this out there. I've basically always been interested in how the intelligence services work. Now, there is a term within the intelligence services for when they create one of these events, these distractions. They call them a spectacular. They're spectacular in that people find them scintillating, and scintillating comes from the Latin term scintillacum, or scintillacus, which means lights and sparkles in the mind. So when they wanted to create a spectacular with Dunblane, they create the Holly Greig hoax. When they want to create a spectacular to divert from the MP almost certainly involved in a sex scandal which involved the murder of a young boy, which went mainstream, they created this spectacular. And these people, you see, the thing is with the Truth Movement is that the people in the Truth Movement seem to have this idea that if they figure out all this stuff about, the occult and all this stuff about the intelligence services, that they have this bizarre notion that the intelligence services themselves have not figured this out. It's almost like, we're the truthers, we've got this sussed out, and they have it in their minds that the actual people who invented this stuff have somehow not sussed this out. I've been saying this from day one. The biggest psyop in the Truth Movement is the Truth Movement itself. And yes, there are occult aspects to this. But a lot of you don't know what the occult is. And we'll talk about this tonight. And you don't know what magic is. And you don't know what Satanism is. You just hear these words. Now, if you want to listen to my show, so you expect me to be like just about everybody else in this movement who basically rehashes David Icke's books from 20 years ago over and over again. You're listening to the wrong guy, okay? As I said, I couldn't give a toss if 99% of you ran away after hearing the show tonight, it means nothing to me. I don't want to be popular. I just want to find the truth. That's all I'm interested in. If you want popularity, go support a football team. Don't be following me. If you can't handle this information, I don't want you in my life. Even if you disagree with me, I'm perfectly fine with that. Even if you think I'm talking a load of bollocks, I'm perfectly fine with that. But if you can't handle it, you're probably never going to be able to handle any kind of mature discussion or discourse in your life. You're not going to be psychologically and cognitively able to do that. Now, let's talk about how the intelligence services function, okay? And you'll find this very, very interesting, because if you look at how the Cold War, spying and such functioned, it's really interesting. When the intelligence services discovered they had a mole or a spy, let's say we're in, say, Berlin or Lebanon or something like that, and the KGB want to know what's going on in, say, the British Embassy in Berlin, okay? They would find a contact. Now, often it would be somebody who would work in the British Embassy, a cleaner, someone who cooks the food in the canteen, a chauffeur, anyone, even a person who does deliveries, picks out the laundry. That's who they seek out, right? The KGB will approach these people and say, we'll give you money if you tell us anything you see going on inside the British Embassy. And they would have drops, and they're usually done in hotels. The drops. The Hilton Hotel, particularly in places like the Brussels Hilton. There's a whole sort of esoteric thing around hotels. I keep meaning to talk about this, but I'll get to it at some point, but it's never fully discussed. So they find, say, a guy who's a cleaner in the British Embassy. The KGB approach him and says, we'll give you $1,000 a month and prostitutes if you tell us anything you see what's going on in the British Embassy when you're in there. At some point, the British Secret Service will discover that this guy is a mole. He's a contact, and he's spying on them. They'll find it out somehow. They'll follow his money somehow. They'll find the fingerprints on the cash they gave them. It'll be found out somehow, okay? Now, it would be no use to them firing this guy or killing him, because that would show two things. One, they have lost the contact back to the KGB. So they can't kill him, and they're not going to come up and they're not going to go up to him and frighten him away. So if they suddenly frighten him, he'll say, I'm not doing this anymore, and you stop going on. They need him. The British Secret Service, MI6 in Berlin, need this contact, this mole, as much as the KGB need this mole. So what they do then is, you have to stop, you truthers have to stop reading books about UFOs and ancient aliens and Anunnaki and Nibiru, and you have to start doing real research, okay? Read books about the Cold War and espionage. What happens then is, MI6, knowing that this guy was a spook feeding stuff back and forth, what they do then is they create a spectacular. The spectacular is used to throw the KGB's intelligence data gathering operations inside the British Embassy off on a wild tangent. So what they do is, as this guy is visiting, they will start setting up something like a really flashy looking, but almost like deliberately flashy looking computer espionage listening system. A big parabolic dish will be installed on the back, a big aerial on the top. New fellas will be in there, will be on computers with head. Now, this is back in the Cold War days now, not today. Do you remember that scene in the Monty Python film, the machine that goes bing? It's just like that. The machine was impressive because it went bing. So this guy sees all this stuff being put in there, okay? All this stuff, right? He then goes back to the KGB and says, they're putting some kind of strange listening device. You want to see this thing? It's got like a big listening dish out the back of the embassy, a big antenna on the roof, and there's all these fellas with headphones on their heads beside computers reading stuff. Now that's all fake. That's all been done. So he'll send that back to the KGB. The KGB then think that this guy has given them some real information, and then the KGB think they have a super listening station inside the British Embassy. All they have is the machine that goes bing. That's all they have, okay? That's the spectacular, okay? So what's basically happened here is that through this spectacular, the MI6 agents inside the British Embassy have gaslighted the KGB by gaslighting the contact, by changing his sense of reality. They've changed the sense of reality of what's inside the British Embassy. In time, eventually, the KGB will realize that that's what this guy saw, a spectacular, pointless information, a pointless piece of theatre, and they were duped by the MI6 guys in the British Embassy. Then they'll drop the cleaner as a contractor, and then the police will jump on the cleaner and charge him with being a double agent. And that's how it works. So when they have somebody, when they want to create a distraction from, say, real espionage processes they were involved in, they create a spectacular, and then the KGB are gaslighted by the spectacular, and they stop looking at the real stuff they're really doing. A distraction, a psyop distraction. And these things, like the Holly Greig cake and the Hampstead case, both scream of that, because there are verifiable mainstream sources that we can point to the distraction from. What happened in Dunblane and what happened at the sex parties at Westminster. And the spectaculars are Holly Greig hoax and the satanic paedophile. And that's what the spectacular is. And we're going to go to the first song, and then we'll talk about more about this. And if you think I've blown your mind now, wait for the next hour and a half. See you on the other side of the song. And that was Cow by Gene Loves Jezebel from their first album. They were a really brilliant band when they first started out. And then Hollywood got their hands on them and turned them into a bad lipstick metal band. But that I always loved the guitar riff in that song, and I loved the style of vocals that they had. Cow by Gene Loves Jezebel. Now, in the first section, we spoke about what's the intelligence aspect of the Hampstead satanic child abuse hoax. Remember, I'm saying satanic child abuse hoax, not the child abuse part. That could be true. It's the satanic part, the spectacular, that's been created by the intelligence services to distract from a real issue. Now, let's talk about the satanic part, okay? Now, yes, let's talk about. You so badly need an education in the truth movement. You start going on about. You watch sites about, and they show like the all-seeing eye, and they go, "Oh, it's Satan, the devil," and I saw, and you don't even know what you're on about half the time, and everything is satanic. It's all satanic. Why? Because someone said Satanism, and Satanism sounds spooky. Ooh, Satan. Ooh, like a movie. Ooh, it's a trigger word. It's a trigger. It's charmed. When you see the word like that, what happens is you're subject to fascination. What fascination is a form of ritual magic. It comes from ritual magic. And what the fascination does is when you see the word or the charged sigil, say the swastika, okay, and you have a certain emotional reaction to it, the blood cells in your eye are the closest blood cells to the surface of your body. There's blood vessels in your eye, and you can see the red in them when you have bloodshot eyes. So the fascination goes is, in ritual magic, that when the sigil, the word, or the hypnotist hits that blood recirculates back into the heart and causes a emotional reaction which triggers hormones in the brain. Fascination. So when people see satanic paedophile rings, the blood vessels in their eyes are fascinated. It goes to their hearts, it fires off hormones in their brain, and they're enchanted. They're enchanted. Same when some people see a swastika or a hammer and sickle and a McDonald's logo or a Pizza Express logo. Okay. Firstly, I will indulge. Let's pretend I believe there is a satanic paedophile ring inside Hampstead, right? And I'm Mr. Truther. You know, I'm 47 years old. I don't have a wife or a kid. I live with my parents still because my wife left me after I'd spent the weekend watching YouTube videos and told her that the world was run by shape-shifting aliens, lizards, and she left me. And so I smoke like 20 spliffs a day and this kind of thing. And I watch YouTube videos all day. And that's I'm researching. I'm researching, okay? And I have all the answers. And so, I know what all these symbols mean because, well, I watched YouTube videos of someone else repeating something that someone else repeated, going back to nothing, okay? So I get my map of Hampstead out, right? And I look around and I go, ooh, why Hampstead? Is Hampstead satanic? And then I look at where the Pizza Express is. And the Pizza Express is in a neighbourhood, a part of the town that's called Horse and Groom. They're grooming the children. And it's on a place called Heath Street. Ted Heath. Ooh, Ted Heath, the notorious satanic paedophile who was outed many years ago as a child killer and abuser. Oh, folks, we're through the matrix here. Let me get Vigilant Citizen up and go. Giving it the five knuckle shuffle, getting all excited up for truth. I'm having a fucking truth wank here. Okay, that's going on, right? That's me. That's another 2 FCC warnings for me, right? So then I look around further. Oh, across the wheat away, there's something called the Holly Mount Steps. Right across from the Pizza Express. The Holly Mount Steps. And if you walk up the Holly Mount Steps, you come to the Holy Hill. It's all Satanism. And then you can avoid the Holy Hill by going through the Golden Yard. It's a shortcut to the Holy. That's pure Masonic, satanic code. They're sending messages to each other. And then if I look down further, I see there's a place called Roslyn Chapel Hill. I've uncovered the satanic link. Worship me. Hit my website, watch my YouTube video on the Reptilian Resistance 2012 channel, where I'll have music that goes dun 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 dun. I'll have like really bad, or the theme song from Requiem for a Dream, din 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 din, and I'll have like a grey lizard's eyes, and that'll all come up, and it's a satanic Hampstead, and then a map will appear showing all these places. Oh, I'm the new Rick Clay. Oh, wow. And never for a moment do you stop and pause and think that just maybe the intelligence services picked Hampstead so you would find those locations and get yourself a truth boner. Not once would you think that. No, you're smarter than MI5 and MI6. You're really smart because you've outsmarted them. And I can tell you one thing: if Rick Clay was murdered over what he uncovered on the 2012 site, it was because he was starting to figure out that the whole thing was deliberately done for that reason, to charge the sigil of the London, the Zion 2012 logo. And if the poor guy was killed, which I don't think he was, or committed suicide, is because he got to the real truth. The real truth was it wasn't a big satanic edifice. The real truth was that it was a big, huge mind game gaslighting thing to get people concentrating on the Olympics for that purpose. That's, if no disrespect to the man and his family, but if that's how it happened, I reckon he got. You see, there's Truth 1.0 where you find all the satanic stuff and all these symbols, and then there's Truth 2.0 where you realise that that's a load of bollocks to cover and hide something else. It's the spectacular, okay? So they picked Hampstead that has all these satanic places: Horse and Groom, Ted Heath Street, Hollymount Steps, Holy Hill, the shortcut to the Golden Yard, and the Roslyn Chapel Hill not far away. Dun dun dun. And the MI5 agents are pissing themselves laughing as you make your videos on the Reptilian Resistance 2012 channel, and you think you're like a hero of truth. And they're love, and you think you're so clever. Donate. And then this is when the Witchfinder generals come in. Now, let's talk about the Witchfinder generals of the past. In the 15th century, there was a book produced called the Malus Maleficarum, which is known as the Hammer of the Witches. And the book was used in order to identify witches, okay? So they did this, said this, acted a certain way. They were witches. This is why you should hate them, because they kissed the devil's bum under the full moon and all this stuff. And we all know that the real Satan. See this? Let me explain something to you. The real black magic is not what the people who've been accused of, but the ones who are the accusers. So you had the Witchfinder generals accusing innocent people of witchcraft. Catholics, Protestants, Jews, right? But what those people didn't do was the satanic part. The satanic part was what the Witchfinder general and the priest and the local governors did afterwards. You understand? That was the real Satanism. The real Satanism was the real Satanists, the black Satanists. Now, I'm not talking about. You have to remember now, Satanism falls into two categories, just like religion or anything. Most of them are good Satanists, a nature-based religion that believes that in the purity of ideals and the purity of expression. That's one side. And then there's like an all occult and all religious. There's the black Satanism, and the black Satanists know, like all black magic, it is the one that gets the results the most, and it appeals to psychopaths and crazies. And in this case, it's been very, very useful to the intelligence services, okay? So everyone's going mad. You see, I've discovered I'm the greatest truther in the world because of all these satanic places in Hampstead. So it's a centre of a satanic circle, okay? Hampstead was picked for that reason. Now, the kids mentioned two places. They mentioned the Pizza Express, and they mentioned McDonald's. Now, the Pizza Express is on, as I said, it's on Heath Road, and they were probably coached to say that in order so people could look that was on Heath Road and find all these places around. The McDonald's that's in Hampstead has been closed since 2013. It was an interesting one. There was an 11-year battle by McDonald's to try and get planning permission to open a McDonald's in Hampstead, because it's a bit of a snooty, hoity-toity area, and they finally got a planning permission. Apparently business was good, and it closed down for no reason. So the building is still there. So these satanic paedophile events that are going on in the back of McDonald's, the restaurant isn't even there anymore. Did you even check? Now the pizza, see, now let's talk about why they mentioned those places. That's because, you see, the truthers are already fired. I'm fired up. I'm a truther. I'm hunting Satanists. I'm standing up for children because I'm a hero like Robert Greene. I'm a hero, right? So anytime they know that anytime these types see a Pizza Express logo, they remember the satanic abuse. Anytime they see a McDonald's logo, they remember the satanic abuse story in Hampstead. Because what happens was, you don't need to create a sigil from scratch in order to create a sigil. You can take a previously known design and charge it emotionally. The National Socialists did this with the swastika. If you look at it from day one, when Adolf Hitler went out there and made his impassioned, fiery speeches appealing to all the problems and the suffering and the neuroses and the frustrations of the German people, behind him was the swastika, a previously existing symbol. And those emotions went past Adolf Hitler and into the swastika. So every time you saw that swastika from that point on, you remembered why you supported National Socialism, because that was a charged symbol. The same thing with the Pizza Express logo, which even looks like a sigil. It's charged now. So anytime they think of Pizza Express, they will think of satanic pedophiles at Hampstead. Anytime they see a McDonald's logo, the same thing. It's part of the spectacular aspects of it. The stories that the kids have posted about these things are absolutely ridiculous. They absolutely could not be true. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen like that. There are pedophile rings, but they don't function. They don't eat babies and wear skulls. That's in the movies. That's to appeal to the Renfields in the Truth Movement. And let me tell you, the Truth Movement is filled with Renfields. You remember Renfield? Renfield was the guy in the asylum whom Dracula targeted in order to do his work. Why? Because a person who's not psychically strong, which is if people enter the Truth Movement psychically strong, all they have to do is spend enough time reading these kinds of stories, looking at this kind of nonsense on Vigilant Citizen, and in no time their psychic defense will be destroyed or damaged, and they will be turned into what I would call a Renfield, a Truth Renfield. Okay, so they know that these people have been damaged, or they're damaged people before they even got into this stuff. And these are the ones who will share this video of the two kids and all the other nonsense about this being a satanic ring and all the other ridiculous stories around it. Because they're Renfields, because they're psychically damaged, their firewall is down. That's the main reason I got involved in this alternative scene, was to help people rebuild their psychic firewall. Because I could see how it was damaging people. From the very first event I ever spoke at, I could see how decent people were being damaged by this incredibly dark and negative information that was given them. I would be amazed if hundreds of truthers have not committed suicide because they just couldn't handle it anymore. The only reason I got involved in this whole stuff was to help people build the psychic firewall and to understand when they're being gaslighted by the psychopaths running the show. That's it, okay? That's it. Now, get that into your head, right? You're no more smarter than the intelligence services. Do not be deluding yourself into thinking that you're smarter than them. You've figured everything out. They have set the traps for you to walk into. You are a mouse, and the satanic thing is a paedophile ring in Hampstead, just like the Holly Gregg thing is a piece of jizz, and you've just got that big metal bar back down on your neck, and it snapped your neck to stop you sniffing out the real stuff at Dunblane and the real stuff of the Westminster paedophile murder of a boy during a sex party. You see how it works? Now, as I said, the Hammer of Wishes, the Malus Maleficarum, we have our witchfinder generals in this movement. The guy who shakes the bones at the Occupy movement, he's a witchfinder general. He knows these are the bones of dead native children. Hula, 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 hula. Ooh, spooky. And then you can actually see in that video where he waves and he shakes the bones of the dead child at the people at Occupy. You can see the people at Occupy are visibly disturbed and shocked. This black magic spell is working. There are other witchfinder generals who have an element of hysteria as big as their donate button, where there are satanic pedophiles here everywhere. There are secret symbols, there are hidden messages. And we're going to hunt them down. And what is done to the people who get named on these lists, just like the ones in Scotland with the Holly Gregg thing in Inverness here, just like the innocent people in Hampstead, we'll assume they're innocent, the ones in Scotland, where they are exactly in the modern age treated the same way the witches the so-called witches, innocent people in the past who were accused of witchcraft, were treated. In many ways, the truth movement could be actually called the hammer of the witches in the digital age. To fire up the psychologically unstable, the psychically unprotected, in order to hunt down the new witches, people who are accused of being in satanic paedophile rings in Scotland and London, in order to destroy. And the intelligence services don't care. And you ever notice no one ever gets sued in any of these things, and no one goes to jail. Robert Greene only went to jail because he did something truly despicable. But he broke the law, and that's why he went. Okay? But otherwise, the main players, and there's particularly this interesting circle of, shall we say, witch-finder generals, who come along with their own malus maleficarum in the truth movement, and suddenly they're there just at the right time. Oh, how interesting. They vanish, and then when a real story like that breaks, suddenly they're back again with the new satanic abuse story. And you all fall, when you know all fall for it. You all fall for it, okay? Loads fall for it, and they get all whipped up in it. Just like the old days. There's no difference in the 21st century by innocent people having their names put on a list as being part of a satanic cannibalism ring than there was in the 15th century when the witchfinder generals went around with the malus maleficarum and said, these people are witches, I named them as witches. The same thing. The world does not change as much as we would like to think it does. Human beings are not that different than we were from our ancestors. We may have more stuff, but ignorance is the eternal disease that rots at the core of the human condition. Now, there may very well be absolute real Satanists involved in this, but they're more likely to be the ones in the video prompting the kids to say these things, because it's releasing enormous amounts of psychic and emotional energy. I believe in magic because I've studied magic. Magic is real, but magic is not a supernatural or paranormal thing. It's merely the working and manipulating of human consciousness in the same way an orchestra conductor with his baton and sheet music manipulates and orchestrates the various instruments within the orchestra in order to attain a certain sound, frequency, and energy. That's what it is. It's not supernatural. It's the changing of someone else's consciousness to create change in conformity with the will of the magician. You always know when these things are in process, because there is something called, that I have named, the psychotic barometer. The psychotic barometer is when you see the Renfields in the movement going bat bleep crazy. The more crazy they are, the more hysterical they are, the more the spell has been cast. The more the sigils have been charged. Because the energies, the psychic energies, are in a turbulent, burning wildfire. And the hysterical and the mentally unbalanced are the ones who are the most psychotic. They're the ones calling anyone who doubts the story a paedophile. They're the ones who are typing in all caps one post after the next on social media. They're the ones who are in a state of absolute wildfire convulsions. And the last time that happened in this movement was the Holly Greig case. And it's happening again in the Hampstead case. This is a very good indicator of a disturbance within the psychic state. And there's only one thing that does that, and that's black magic. So yes, black magic Satanists who've taken the short path to power are involved and have probably been recruited, just like the intelligence services recruit cults. They've probably recruited these people who maybe actually even be in Hampstead. We don't know. We don't know the identities of the people interviewing these kids. They could very well be practicing Satanists who wrote the script out for a maximum energy harvesting. So it serves two purposes. I'm absolutely convinced that some of the main players in this scene, in this modern Hammer of the Witches, are Satanists. I can tell you for a fact, I can't name the person because obviously there's legal repercussions. But I know for a fact one hardcore black Satanist who I had personal contact with and immediately recognized him for what he was, or she was. It could be a man, could be a woman. I'm not going to say what they were. And this individual was in the High Court in London behind Holly Greig and her mother with a big, big smile on the face, sucking up the energy. This is why these types don't seem to get sued. When it was anybody else, they'd be sued and destroyed or in prison because they're helping the spectacular take place. It's a double deal. You guys get your satanic energy harvesting. We get our spectacular to distract the truthers. All good. The intelligence services, you find cults very, very useful. Now, maybe not everyone in the cult knows they're directly working for the intelligence services, but one or two of them at the top always do. Always do. And they're also, shall we say, gaslighting the members below them, even though they're justifying by saying, well, we're getting what we want from this. We're getting energy and we're getting money. Remember the story of the KGB and the contact I just told you earlier on between the British Embassy and the KGB in Berlin? Same idea. So who are the contacts in this case? Well, the contacts in this case are the truthers who are losing their minds and sharing the videos. Oldest game in town. All you truthers, you think you're so clever. You think you have it sussed. And you have been played into one trap after the other because the enemy of ignorance has been cultivated in your brain and it grows like an untamed forest inside your psyche. And the only thing you have to protect you, your psychic firewall, has been overgrown and riddled with weeds. Your land is barren, overgrown with scrub and forest, and you do not have an integrated psyche that's feeding your consciousness rather than tearing your consciousness to pieces in order to lead you into traps. There are psyops everywhere. The truth movement's biggest psyop is the truth movement. Study. Learn about the occult and magic, and not from the Reptilian Resistance 2012 channel or some other truth guru who mentions terms, magical terms. Ooh, archons. Ooh, Saturn. Ooh, satanic. That's not an education. That's like going to McDonald's and claiming that you went to culinary college. That's what this. Because you know what's inside a Big Mac.